Good morning. Today we are working on 8.3, multiplying and dividing rational functions. This is part 1 out of 2 videos I'll be making. This is for Algebra 2, TEKS 2A.7F, which says we're going to combine, we're going to do the sum, the difference, the product, and division of the rational functions. So we're going to start off by simplifying some rational functions that we have. By simplifying, we're going to look for factors that go into it. We're going to look for greatest common factors. And if we have a factor on the numerator and denominator, they divide by each other to 1. So we basically cross them out. So like on problem number 1, my denominator, I'm going to look for a greatest common factor of 15x and 20. So what number goes into 15 and 20? I'm going to go ahead and pull out a 5. So I have a 5x on top, and on the bottom I have 5. And when I factor out a 5, I'm left with 3x minus 4. Now when we are dividing or simplifying, again, we're looking for common terms on the numerator and denominator. So in this problem, that 5 divided by 5 actually just becomes a 1. So my final answer is x over 3x minus 4. Now one of the mistakes I see happening is people saying, well, can't the x's, don't they also divide to 1? No, because on your denominator, that 3x minus 4 is attached to each other. You can't separate them. To cancel out a 3x minus 4, to divide it, you have to have another 3x minus 4. So this is going to be my final answer. Question number 2. So on my numerator, I have x minus 2. My denominator is a trinomial. So I look for GCF. I don't see one. So on my denominator, my a is 1. So I'm going to actually go back to factors of a times c, whose sum is b. So on my denominator, 1 times 6 will actually tell me that AC is 6. When I look for b, I'm looking at this value right here. So b is a negative 5. So my factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Now they have to multiply to give me a positive 6, but I have to add them together to give me a negative 5. The only way to get a positive and a negative is by having 2 negative answers. And because a is a 1, my factors are x minus 2 and x minus 3. I do not have to do grouping because a is 1. Now if my terms are the same on the top and bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this just so that we can have this. If they are the same on the numerator and denominator, they divide to 1. So my final answer is a 1 over x minus 3. Question number 3. My numerator, I look for a greatest common factor. It does have one, so I'm going to factor out a 3. What's left when I factor out a 3? 2x plus 3. My denominator, I have 2 terms, and I have a minus sign. If I have 2 terms and a minus sign, I'm checking if this is a difference of squares. Can I take the square root of the first term? Yes. Can I take the square root of the second term? Yes. If I can and there's a minus sign, it is called a difference of squares. So basically, I'm going to figure out what my a value was. I'm going to figure out what my b value was. And this becomes a plus b, a minus b. So the square root of 4x squared is 2x. The square root of 9 is 3. And my signs are going to be a sum and a difference. Now, if you have the same terms on the numerator and denominator, they divide out to 1. So my numerator is 3 times 1. My denominator is 2x minus 3. We're going to do a couple more on here. My numerator has two terms with a squared and 9. So if I have two terms, I'm going to check if I can take the square root of both. Can I take the square root of x squared? Yes. Can I take the square root of 9? Yes. My numerator factors to a sum and a difference. This is called a difference of squares. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3. One sum, one difference. My denominator. Does it have a number I can factor out? The answer is yes. I can factor out a 3. When I factor out a 3, I'm left with x minus 3. If they are the same on the numerator and denominator, they divide to 1. My final answer is x plus 3 over 3. We're going to do one more question down here just because it's another factoring one, which I think is good practice. Again, we always look for GCF. My numerator has a GCF of 3, greatest common factor. When I factor out a 3, I have x squared plus 6x plus 8. And my denominator is x plus 4. Well, on my numerator, in parentheses, I have a trinomial. I'm going to see if the trinomial is factorable. Factors of a times c that add up to b. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Do any of these numbers add up to 6? Yes. So my numerator, I'm going to go ahead and factor my numerator into x plus 2, x plus 4. And my denominator was still x plus 4. If we have a pair on the numerator and denominator, they divide to 1, and I'm left with 3 times x plus 2. Now this was simplifying rational expressions, which is important for when we get into adding and subtracting and multiplying, which is actually next on our list. So we're actually going to go down to multiplying. So multiplying, we still want to find common terms. So when I multiply, I can either multiply straight across first, or I can factor. It doesn't really matter. On this problem, I have 1 over x minus 2, x plus 1. Now, the reason I didn't write anything for the top is because that's a difference of squares again. Right away, we should recognize difference of squares if I can take the square root of both of them and if there's a minus sign. This factors to a sum and a difference of their square roots. So this is x plus 2, x minus 2. So same thing that we were doing before. If we factor and something is the same on the numerator and denominator, they divide to 1. My final answer is x plus 2 over x plus 1. The next question. Okay. Similar concepts. I can multiply straight across. I get negative 2 over x to the 4th. Can anything divide? No. That is my answer. Okay. The next question. Okay. When I multiply, I have x plus 2 multiplied by x. I'm going to put the x in the front. It doesn't matter. And on the denominator, I have x minus 3 and x plus 2. If they are the same on the numerator and denominator, they divide to 1. So I basically cross them off. I can put a 1 there. And the numerator is x times 1. It's just x. And my denominator is x minus 3. We'll do one more question. We're going to multiply straight across. But I need to factor my first fraction. So on this problem right here, without me making a table, I see 3 terms. I'm going to factor my trinomial. What numbers multiply to 3 but add to negative 4? Well, the only way to get a positive 3 is a 3 and a 1. Well, how do these numbers multiply to 3, but if I combine them, they give me negative 4? It's x minus 1, x minus 3. My denominator. what multiplies to -7 but adds to 6? My only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. So which one has to be negative in order for them to add together to +6? It's going to be +7, +1. So again, I'm looking for terms on the denominator and numerator that are the same, and if they're the same, I can divide them out to 1. The x minus 3 and the x minus 3 pair up. X minus 7, x minus 7. Kind of got a little bit messy here. You can write it if you want. So whatever I have left, since nothing else can divide to 1, is my answer. Okay, we're going to end our part 1 video here. We just focused on simplifying and multiplying. Part 2, we'll do multiplying and dividing.